Okay, so here are the opinion polls. The headline in the Standard this morning, neck and neck race opinion poll shows. The latest survey shows leading candidates are gaining popularity in each other's strongholds, with Raila eating into Ruto's Mount Kenya base and the DP slicing Odinga's lead in Nyanza and Western. The survey also shows more undecided voters are finally settling for their preferred candidate. This is quoting a study that was done by Tifa Research, and the founder and CEO of Tifa, Maggie Ireri, joins us in the studio. Good morning, Maggie.
Good morning.
Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Thank you.
Welcome to the hot seat. How do you feel this morning? Are you well?
I'm happy it's hot because the weather out there is really cold.
It is.
Yes.
It's that time of the year when you just want to be indoors and not step out at all. Mm-hmm. This research that your organization released yesterday is basically showing some numbers. So, and we were looking at it earlier when we were reviewing the newspaper headlines and saying, okay, so it's showing some changes over the last couple of months. In February, for instance, William Ruto had 38% support, Raila Odinga 27%, and then there was undecided at 20%, and those who did not respond were at 11%. If we just go into May, Ruto's lead had cut down to 35%, Raila had gained from 27% to 39%, undecided had reduced from 20 to 15%, and the no responses were also reducing to 8%. Now, this latest one is showing 39% Ruto, 42% Raila, Wajackoyah 4%, no response 4%, and undecided 10%. It's showing, like the headline in the paper is indicating here, there's a gain for both the leading contenders into each other's turf. Break down these figures for us, just so we can understand them better.
Let me start with William Ruto, and I want to go back as far back as last year, because what you're seeing is data for 2022. If I go back to last year, the beginning of last year, we were conducting polls every quarter. And if you look at the data consistently, William Ruto has remained at either between 34% and 39%. So even though, if you look at this now, it looks like he's gained, if you get an average, his average has actually been between the 30s. Now, if you look at Raila Odinga's support again from the last 1 year, when we started polling, he was initially at 8% and has consistently been growing over time. And I think what we are happy about as researchers is that the percentage of undecideds is going down and the people who are not responding is going down, because that will allow us to be able to estimate with a certain degree of accuracy the election outcome. But if I could just talk about the current figures now, we did this survey just after a month after the two main contenders named their running mates. That is Martha Karua and Gachagua. So what we see is that there seems to be some momentum that Raila Odinga got by naming Martha Karua as his running mate as compared to William Ruto naming Gachagua.
But that is one way of saying it. There's another way that you've also said that it appears as if there was no impact. Was that a question that you asked?
In terms of Martha Karua's
yeah.
So
the choice of running mate, has it had an impact on your choice of presidential candidate?
Let's look at the data. If you look at the expectation from the public and the various political class, the expectation was that Martha Karua would attract the female vote. And even when she's going out on the campaign trail, she's always focusing on women issues and saying, yeah, ni mama, and so on. What our data is showing that consistently from last year, there's always been more males supporting Raila Odinga as compared to females. And even when Martha came on board, the gap has narrowed between the number of women and men supporting Raila Odinga, but there's still more males supporting Raila Odinga. So it goes back to what you're saying. What impact has Martha had? She's created a momentum in the campaign, but she seems to be, her and Raila seem to still be attracting more men than women.
So she hasn't, just to put it crudely, she hasn't stolen women from Ruto's support base.
She hasn't. And even if you look at Central or Mount Kenya, because we also compared what Raila had before in the last survey and the current one, there's been no change. in the central support or Mount Kenya support. So a lot of talk, but when you look at the data, we're seeing different things.
When you say there is no change, what do you mean?
Okay, so if you look at the Mount Kenya vote, if I'm not wrong, the support was in there about 24% in the last survey that we conducted. Right now, I'm not talking about Raila's support. Right now, the support is still in the 24%. So if she was who they're saying she is, able to bring the Mount Kenya vote and get people from Mount Kenya to vote for Raila Odinga, it has not happened.
What about the deputy president's vote? Is it also consistent, or has it increased? What has happened to it?
So the deputy president has consistently been leading in Mount Kenya, but in this particular survey, we are seeing that his support levels in Mount Kenya has gone up slightly. So if you already had a majority in Central, the gains are there, but there's not too much gain you can get if you already had the majority. So what am I saying? So Rigathi, yes, was an advantage in Mount Kenya, but don't forget that William Ruto already had the support of the Mount Kenya. So whatever Rigathi has added in Mount Kenya could be a bit, but not that much.
What is it that determines the understanding that you have about the data that represents the support? What is it that you look for? What is it that you ask? And what selection of individuals do you, how dispassionate, how democratic is the selection of the individuals whom you poll? Of course, I'm going to ask what you also ask.
So we don't select the respondents democratically. We select.
Is it random?
It is, yeah. We select them scientifically, which is random. So what we do is that we look at the voter register in the country, and we identify the proportions of voters in each county, and we distribute the sample size proportionate to the voter register in each county. The other thing we've been looking at, which is not available in the voter register, is the ethnicity of the respondents. Because sometimes when you distribute the sample scientifically proportionate to the counties, you may find that in your sample, you could be over-indexing in some particular tribe. So what we do is we look at the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics data, and we then check our sample to confirm that even as we have sampled randomly, distributed the sample randomly, the ethnic breakdown of the sample is also national. And if there's any imbalance, there's something called weighting that is used to adjust the sample if necessary, especially on the ethnicity. Now, when we then identify the sample, we call respondents randomly. We have a database of respondents, and we can tell this respondent was recruited when he was living in a particular county, ward, and etc., and we call them, and we confirm that they still live there. We confirm whether they're registered voters, and then we ask them the questions in terms of their voting intentions. And also what we do is that we tell them, you don't have to participate if you don't want to participate. So you may find that maybe for every successful interview we do, we may have to call about 5 to 7 people before we get to a successful interview.
And what percentage do you attribute to bias, and what percentage do you attribute to simply non-compliance with what it is that you're asking?
You see, the way that our researchers are trained, it's a very interactive discussion. So we normally start on general issues. The big questions are asked at the end. So the role of the researcher is to make the respondent feel comfortable, and always telling them, if you want to drop out of the call, it's okay. Still as malize. So by making them feel comfortable, we make them feel at ease to be able to give proper answers. Now, when we get to the main question, if a respondent, we ask them, if elections are to be held today, who do you vote for as president? And we keep quiet. No prompting, no bias. And they give us the answer. If we feel that there's a hesitation, we ask them, mbona una hesitate? And they can tell us, I've not decided, and maybe I don't have a response. And we don't put them under pressure. Now, by not putting them under pressure, we are making sure that we're able to get their perspectives. Now, towards the end of the interview, we ask them, now that you've come towards the end of the interview, is there anything else you'd like to say? And you find some people saying, kuna ile swali sikujibu hapo awali, let me then give you feedback. So by doing that, we are doing what called professional interviews, and we are asking questions in such a way that I don't put the respondents under pressure.
Do you take into account the factor that when people are called upon to give a response to a stranger, that they are more likely to tell you what they think you want to hear as opposed to telling you what you really think? Question number one. Question number two. Do you have situations where you have polled and then looked at the results of the actual election and juxtaposed the two? What people told us and how the voting patterns then panned out?
So in terms of the first question, do people then, we call people, do they tell us what we want to hear? The answer is no. In fact, what we are finding, and here I just want to be very, very objective. If I do a face-to-face interview and I do a telephonic interview, the difference is that we have more undecideds in the telephonic as compared to the face-to-face. Because when I meet you face-to-face, there's that rapport, trusting somebody and all that. So the difference here is not that they lie. They say, sijaamua. Now, our intention, therefore, is at least in this month, we need to do a face-to-face survey so that we can see whether these undecideds will actually go down further. So that's the situation we are in. Now, are there instances where we said, okay, we did a survey, let's go back and compare what the outcome was? We did. And I don't know whether I shared it in this on air here, but I remember we had a poll for presidential, and we kept on showing that Kalonzo Musyoka, I think it was in 2007 election, Kalonzo Musyoka was at 10%, 10%, 10%. After the election, we went down to Eastern Machakos and Kitui, and we asked people, did you see the opinion polls that were being published by our company? They said yes. What percentage were we giving, or was the poll giving Kalonzo Musyoka? Around 9 to 10%. Did that affect how you are voting? They said no. We actually decided to vote for him, and as you know, he got about 11%, and it's that season where Kibaki invited him into a handshake and he became vice president, and they were very proud of what they did. So I feel that Kenyans have gotten to a point where they say, I want to give my opinion, and I hope it will get into the survey, it will get published, and at least my candidate will be doing well.
But did it apply in that same election? Did it apply to the other candidates? Did you get the same result at the end for Raila and for Kibaki?
That is a very good question.
She is doing what some of her respondents have done. She has hesitated.
I'm not gonna hesitate.
So this that I will say we've done polls. Let me start. There are some we've done we've done 2 polls that we predicted accurately, and then I'll talk about some that were not very accurate.
Okay.
So if you remember the constitutional review, the referendum elections,
2010.
yes, both of them actually.
2005 and 2010.
Yeah. So we did a survey, and we were able to predict the outcome accurately. And when we compared what we predicted a few weeks before the referendums and after, it was very accurate. And we walked away saying, you know what, that was fantastic. Now, when it came to some of these elections, we have published polls consistently showing that one person was going to win. And I think for this particular instance, it was Raila Odinga. But when the election outcome came, the results were different. And I would like to say with a lot of caution, because I do not want to criticize the IEBC. I think in some of these elections, there's what the opinion polls show you, and sometimes the elections are mad with issues, system issues, technology issues, people not finding the names of the voter register, and many, many other things that I don't want to get into details. So although we try our best to estimate the outcome, sometimes kwa ground vitu ni different. Things may not work out as well as they could. And then finally, there's the issue of voter turnout. Voter turnout is very, very critical because we assume when we're doing our data, we assume that these are the results. We don't factor in.
You assume 100% turnout.
Exactly. We don't factor in the voter turnout. Now, if you look at the voter turnout, especially, I'm going to talk about one particular region, the coast. In those elections, we always want that Raila was ahead. But the voter turnout at the coast is always shocking. So you're doing very well at the coast, but if your voter turnout is in the 60s and the 50s, for sure, your numbers will be suppressed. So there's science, there's IBC, and then there's also the voter turnout.
Then don't you also factor in, looking historically in the last elections, X number of elections, this was the average voter turnout, and then also in your research, you factor that in?
We do, but also we don't factor in the ability of leaders to mobilize. We've seen fluctuations by region in terms of voter turnout. So in this particular, for instance, let me give you an example. If you look at the last election, the turnout in Mount Kenya was very high. Do you know what we're seeing now? We're seeing that the voter turnout is likely to be lower than it has been.
How much lower?
So we're seeing around about 75% intended voter turnout. Intended. And usually whatever people intend ends up being higher than what actually happens.
Okay.
So
intended here is coming from a direct question of do you intend to vote this year?
Yes.
Are you a registered voter? Yes.
Yes.
Do you intend to come out and vote?
Yes.
Sijiski.
Yes.
And that also now indicates. So what is the current poll showing in terms of intended voter turnout?
For the whole country?
Yes.
So definitely will vote. There is definitely and probably, but let's look at the definitely. Definitely will vote. We're getting 70% total. If I look at Mount Kenya, we're seeing 69%. If you look at the coast, 57% intention to vote.
Whoa.
If you look at
And this is definitely.
Definitely, yes. So when you factor in those variations, in the last election, the voter turnout at the coast was at 64%. Now, definitely vote is at 57%. And these numbers, by the time you get to the election, they could change. So I think it's onus on the candidates, whether they're running for governor, senator, even presidential, getting the voters to get out and vote is very, very critical.
Are you able to pick out why the people who say probably or no, what influences them?
At the moment, we don't have that information in terms of why is it a probability, why is it a definite, and perhaps that's something we can investigate moving forward as we get closer to the election.
Because the 70% voter turnout of the 22 million, how would we compare with the last election? What was the voter turnout in 2017?
I think it was in the 70s. I'm not very sure about that.
Yeah.
Maybe you guys would know the figure. I don't have that figure.
It's something around that figure of 70% voter turnout.
I actually have it on my computer.
So it means that we are basically dealing with about the same kind of percentage of voter turnout. Of course, not the same number because the registered voters are now more.
Yes, so that 70% will represent a greater number.
Yes, but you see, in an election, it is the proportion that you get. You're supposed to get 50% plus one of
whatever.
Whatever.
Voters
Yeah. So it's the votes cast. And then also the other thing we are also seeing, just sorry to interrupt you, is that amongst the 18 to 24, the intention to vote is also lower. Again, if you look at and I know IBC has said that the registration amongst that target group was not very high, but proportionate in terms of the population.
They shouldn't say it wasn't very high. They shouldn't use the word high with reference to that. It was low.
It wasn't very high at all.
Nini, it was low. It's not very high.
Out of about 4 million people who got IDs in the last 4 years, only about 2 million registered as voters. Right? And that then indicates there's an issue. Actually, out of a target of 6 million people who should have, who qualified to register as voters this time.
A third.
Only about 2 million registered as voters. There's an issue. 29 after 8. Let's take a quick break, right? We have Maggie Ireri with us in the studio. Maggie is the founder and CEO of Trends and Insights for Africa. That's TIFA Research. They released the new opinion poll yesterday that's indicating several things, showing us how the trends are shifting and moving. We'll talk about that, the voter demographic, the youth. We'll also talk about this new emergence of George Wajackoyah on the polls and trying to understand exactly what's happening here.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
We are live on SpiceFM around the country. We are on SpiceFM KE, YouTube and Facebook around the world. We are live on KTN Home and we are also live on KTN News. This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. Maggie, before we went to the break, we're looking at the probable voter turnout in this election. Let's look back again, and you found the figures. 2013 voter turnout, 2017 turnout.
So 2013 voter turnout was 85.9%. 2017 was 78%, and that was for round one. Let's not talk about the round two election. And then if you look at the 2002 election that got Kibaki in, the turnout was 57%.
Whoa.
So when you're talking about a probability of about 70%, As in, will definitely vote. That's pretty okay compared to the historical perspective. In terms
70 is those who have said, I will definitely vote.
Yes.
And then there's a percentage who said, I may probably vote.
Yes.
Probably, what was the percentage?
That was 13%.
Okay.
Probably.
Okay. So, is it okay to combine those two?
You can.
70 plus 13 and going to 83% probable.
Depends whether you see the glass as half full or half
definitely
empty.
probable turnout of 80% and above.
Do you ever figure out why it is the probables are probable and why
They're not likely are not likely?
We can only imply. We can only basically infer from the data.
Extrapolate.
Yeah. So when we look at some of the people, they're saying they've not decided who they'll vote for, and they're still waiting to hear more from the candidates in terms of enabling them to get out and vote. And then there's also a small percentage who have concerns about whether the election will be free and fair. So that makes them say either will not vote or probably.
Of these reasons, which reason have we found to take the pole position? Which one stands out? The reasons that people give.
So if you looked at the last election, the last poll we did around May, the issue was waiting for the candidates' manifestos to be launched. That has happened. Now we're talking about the ability to see that the election will be free and fair, and that percentage is not very high. It's a small percentage.
Why I ask the question is because I wonder, do we actually vote for those reasons that people tell you that they are undecided for?
Or like the manifestos?
Yes.
That's a good question because people purport to have logical reasons for voting for candidates, but then when they go to the ballot box, the reasons they vote are illogical. So
There's reason behind it. You see, that's why I asked the initial question about whether we can determinedly say that what people respond to when you call them represents what they will actually do. That's why I asked. But you cannot argue with data. Okay? I mean, you can try if you want to, but data speaks volumes. Because if what your respondents told you was their thoughts on these matters and it represents the actual outcome and you can see there's correlation, then you can't argue with it. But then, do we know how many of those who indicated that they were undecided or were thinking about it, how many of them actually cross over? Because in this election, it seems the undecided the number seems to be significant. And significant to the point where if they shift, they could actually make a big change.
If the undecideds are below the margin of error, because our data is plus or minus 2.7% margin of error, if the undecideds are below, then you can say, you know what, we know how we can predict this election accurately based on the opinion.
But this one we can't.
This one we can't. And there's no way of telling how the undecideds will vote. We don't know whether there's going to be something major that will happen between now and the election date that could shift.
Which is 27 days away.
Exactly. Anything could happen.
Maggie, is there anything major that has happened between February and June? February, the undecideds were 20%. It's half of that now.
The main thing that has happened is naming of the running mates and the coming up with the manifestos. Those are the main things that have happened.
But have they shifted those who are undecided into making a decision?
Yes, they are increasingly. And I'm not saying those are the only two factors. There could be others, but those are the two major factors that we see.
And
so if I can give you an example,
yes.
When just before the running mates were named, quite a number of people were saying they were undecided. So when we did a poll and we asked people, were you undecided before? And some of them would say, yes, we were. What has made you decide? It's a running mates. And I'm not saying they told us who was better, but they're saying that now that it's clear how the ticket will be, then they can make a decision.
Okay. So then there has been an impact on Martha Karua's choice as running mate.
In ensuring, and I would like to say both.
Because I'm saying, go ahead.
I'd like to say both in making people decide. They've converted the undecideds. I'm not saying it's one of the running mates.
Okay.
Yes.
But then, if you look at the other figures, so if Raila was at 27% in February and is now at 42%, and the undecideds have gone down by 10%, then you can say, okay, one of the reasons would be maybe the figures are coming from somewhere. His his 27 to 42 must be coming from somewhere. It's either coming from the undecideds, those that did not give a response, or those that were for the other candidates, which was none in February, or those that were in William Ruto, who has dropped who has actually increased from 38 in February to 39 in June.
So what that means
so it's undecided.
Somebody has harvested.
And no response.
Somebody has harvested more than the other from the undecided and the response. It seems to be the Raila camp because there's a 15% jump. But so has the deputy president because his numbers have also increased. The fundamental difference is that the former prime minister has gathered more. So how then do you say that the appointment of the running mates has not
had an impact on his ticket?
Okay, so what we're saying, the appointment of his running mate, of course, has an advantage. But also what you're seeing is poaching, as in there's a certain percentage of respondents who have moved from one presidential candidate to another, a certain amount. So we cannot say 100% it's because of the running mate. And these things could continue. You may find that today somebody, and I'm not saying it's a majority, a minority may say, today I'm supporting candidate A. After a few weeks, they change, depending on some of the things that are happening in the campaign trail.
Something which I consider interesting to the point of being concerning, the low turnout at something like the coast. The 57% you speak of is representative of registered voters. Okay, do you take the time to find out why it is that there is a low turnout?
Low definite intention to turn out.
Yes.
You see, I think I talked about this. It's the perception whether the election will be fair and fair.
On Tuesday mornings, I'm a bit slow. So please repeat.
Especially after a long weekend.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's an issue of perception. Perceptions that the elections may not be fair and fair. And I'm not saying it's a big percentage. Perception that perhaps there are some things that have been happening on the campaign trail that are making them change their mind or become concerned about the elections. And also what we see, and here I'm going to get some insights from the data, we find that the intention to vote is lower amongst women as compared to men. So does that mean that women are going to be bogged down in the house doing household issues, taking care of kids, as compared to men? Or do women don't want to go out and queue? Or is there going to be possible chaos at the polling stations? So we find more women have a lower intention to get out and vote. Then the other category that has a lower intention to get out and vote, even though they're registered, are the youth.
So it could be 35 and below.
Yes, there could be apathy, perhaps. I mean, I'm registered, but maybe I may not end up
exercising
voting.
their rights.
Exactly.
Could it be indicative that the candidates, none of the campaigns seems to be addressing the issues that matter to these people? If you look at that 57% intention to vote in the coast is not good. If you compare with the other regions, say 69% in Mount Kenya, which you say that already is like a lower intention to vote compared to the other elections. If you compare to, say, Nairobi and Nyanza and Western and say like the Central Rift or the North Rift, there's a huge disparity here in terms of those who intend to come out and vote in the coast. What would be the reason? Beyond that, could it also be that they don't feel that the candidates are addressing the issues that really matter to them?
And also, just to add on to that, historically, the coast has always had a lower voter turnout, even in the last election. And I agree with you, it could be that maybe none of the candidates has addressed their issues to a certain extent that they feel compelled to turn out and vote. One of the issues at the coast is the land issue that has been going on for many, many years. Presidential candidates promise to sort out the issues, but it doesn't. And I think you saw that in the last, when Raila Odinga was naming part of his lineup, he named Hassan Joho as a person who will be the potential cabinet secretary of lands. But in spite of that, we're still seeing that the voter turnout is low. So I agree with you that there is something that none of the two are doing that is compelling the people at the coast to turn out, in spite of all the effort that they've done. You see a lot of campaign activities at the coast, a lot of things happening, but...
Let me ask the question. Just like they could be individual candidates who spur the electorate to want to vote, is it possible that the voter turnout intention can be dampened by individuals as well? Meaning, this one people don't like. Or if this is the person,
an inspirational candidate.
completely uninspiring. That's why I'm referring to dampening, because someone says, if this is what we're going for, forget it. I'd rather not bother.
Perhaps, but also let me also give you another example. Assuming, and this is assuming Sonko is not allowed to run in Mombasa, and the person who will be the ODM flag bearer will be Abdul Samad, isn't it?
Yeah.
The next person, I don't even know the number 3 in terms of competing with him. If he is given if he's the only person running on that ballot box,
This
it
is
is
Hassan
so
Omar
obvious.
of UDA.
Yes, but in terms of our polls, he's not showing that he doesn't even get above 10%.
Dr. Kingi of Power.
No, who doesn't get above 10%?
Hassan Omar.
He doesn't get above 10%.
And Kingi. So
And
what
Kingi,
you have is the last time we did a poll, it's either the two, not Hassan Omar, Abdul Samad or Sonko.
Or Sonko.
If Sonko doesn't run, it will be so obvious that the next governor is going to be Abdul Samad. So the question is, will he campaign for himself as much? Will he campaign for the party as much? Because if a ticket is already given, then the campaign activity ends up being not as competitive as before. And that could dampen the voter turnout. This is just a hypothesis.
Oh, no. Let's go with the hypothesis.
There's Owiti of which party? And he's a former MP of Nyali. He knows how to campaign. So all these are not showing up
No, they're not.
in the polls.
They're not.
Aye.
Yeah.
They are only, there are two horses.
So are you saying that this is party affiliation? Because really, the individuals may not even be known, but the party has had a historical position.
The party has been dominant in, let's say, I'm talking about Mombasa.
Mombasa
ODM is dominant in Mombasa. Azimio is also now dominant in Mombasa.
Are they?
Yes, we have polls showing that. Now,
How dominant?
I would have to check, but if you compare the
Azimio as a coalition.
Azimio as a coalition. Okay, let's talk about the support for Abdul Samad and Sonko. The difference is about 15%, which is quite high. So Sonko is in the 20s, Abdul Samad must be in the 40s. Now, if you combine Abdul Samad and Sonko, both of them are in Azimio. Yeah, aren't they? They're parties. So you combine them. So assuming Sonko is not there, of course, most of the support will go to Abdul Samad.
So we assume.
So yes, I'm saying this is a hypothesis.
I understand.
And most of these presidential candidates are depending on their people on the ground to campaign for them. Let me give you another example. Nairobi, we did a poll in Nairobi, and the person who is leading is Sakaja in the poll. But in terms of the party that is leading in Nairobi is Azimio. So you find that Sakaja is also attracting many more people from out of his party. Now, you begin to ask yourself the question, when he's campaigning, is he campaigning for himself only? Does he campaign for the party? Does he campaign for the presidency? And will that motivate people to turn out? I feel that where there's high competition, where the stakes are high, voter turnout will be high.
Turnout is higher.
Where the stakes are low, let's wait for a lower voter turnout.
So Kericho may be different because we already have woman candidates.
Governor seems to be a sure thing.
Yeah.
Yes, it could be. And that's why eventually towards the end of the election, you see, and this, I'm talking about the last election, you find that the presidential candidates coin an emotional issue that will get you to wake up in the morning and vote. And it's not a logical issue that it's a manifestos or etc. At the end of it all, there has to be an emotional push to get guys to turn out and vote.
You know, that Mombasa race is an interesting one because, see, Sonko is one of these he's an enigma of sorts. The pull that Sonko seems to have with the electorate is something that one could argue even defies logic, and yet it actually doesn't. He seems to be one of these politicians who seems to have understood the fundamental and basic needs that most people have. If you look at the way he goes about physically campaigning, what he does, it's something that people look at. He solves an immediate problem, and as far as they're concerned, that's good enough. Which tells me that he has understood that the majority of people who vote in this country they're not interested in the future. This future that people keep talking about, we'll do this in the future, No. They want someone who's going to solve the problem that they have currently.
Which is?
Yes, and if you can solve it, then they feel, this guy gets it.
Or maybe they want someone who can walk into the future with them from today.
Walk into by resonating with the present and showing that you understand their present.
Handhold me today and we walk together. Don't tell me I'm
going to do this.
There is the future. You cross the river.
I'm waiting for you on the other side.
Wajackoyah, Maggie. So Wajackoyah was not showing in February. Wajackoyah is showing in June. What's the percentage?
His percentage is 4%.
So 4%. So the Standard has done a story. If we are to assume 100% voter turnout, 22.1 million voters, 880,000 votes. Okay. Now, what does that mean? When you look at this, of course, it's coming from the undecided. As you said, also poaching from the other candidates. If you look at the demographic, are you able to tell what demographic is saying that I would vote for Wajackoyah?
Yeah, so if you look at the demographics that is intending to vote for Wajackoyah, so we've categorized the sample by 18 to 34, that is a youth, and 35 plus. Wajackoyah support, although it's small, the support amongst the youth is 3 times higher than the support he has from the people aged 35 plus. So you can already see who he's attracting. And you remember, this is a group that did not register. Okay, not many of them, as many registered as voters.
Yep.
And for some reason, their intention to vote is lower, but he's attracting that category of respondents and voters rather. And then what we did, I just before I came to here, I removed the undecideds from the sample, and then I removed the non-responses from the sample, and then I recalculated the presidential race. So if you remove that, Raila Odinga would have 49%, William Ruto would have 46%, Wajackoyah would have 5%. If you extrapolate that to the population, or the voter population, Wajackoyah could easily end up with a million votes.
With a million plus votes.
Which is higher than what Peter Kenneth has ever gotten, Martha Karua when they were running for presidential candidates. He may be your handshake guy now.
Okay. So if we are to look at this, then nobody has crossed the 50% mark.
No.
Okay. If we remove the undecided and all, like you've recalculated, it's 49% for Raila and what for Ruto?
46.
46 for Ruto.
Yes, and 5%.
And 5% for Wajackoyah.
Yes.
So if Raila could eat into Ruto or Wajackoyah's numbers, he'd cross over into 50. If he can't, then it would mean that we have to go into a runoff and someone has to sit Wajackoyah down and have a conversation.
Yes. But you can, and if you look at the way Wajackoyah has been speaking, who do you think he's likely to be listening to, assuming there's a runoff between Ruto and Raila? He's already leaning towards one side.
What you're saying, beyond listening to himself, who else will he listen to?
He's already
declared in the
leaning.
public rallies.
Yes, several times.
How he'd work, who he'd work with, and all. But is he saying that based on where he's going, the regions that he visited? For example, when he was in that region, which is a stronghold of Raila Odinga's, of course he had to speak, if you vote for me, I'll still work with...
He's a politician.
I'll still work with, I mean, it's not that we are enemies.
Yeah.
We are friends. I mean, I could work with him. If he went to maybe Central Rift, he'd speak the other way and say the same thing. William Ruto is a good man. I know him very well. We can work together. In fact, I can even be his lawyer.
There's something that I'd like to ask. In the work that you've done, have you had surprises? Meaning, your polls tell you this, and then come election day, something completely different happens, and you wonder, how come we didn't see that? And of course, chances are you couldn't have.
Yes, we've had that. I remember the by-election where Faisal, is it Msambweni? Yeah, which was Msambweni.
Yeah.
In our poll, we did predict that the ODM candidate, I can't remember his name, would win against Faisal. And we did publish a poll. Even one of the media houses...
it was Boga.
Yes, Boga, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, so also one of the media houses did do a poll, and our polls are consistently showing that Boga was going to win. But what happened on that, what I hear happened, because I don't have evidence, the voter turnout was very poor, especially in the areas that were stronger for ODM. Then the other issue was that there was an emotional issue that was coined that made people concerned about voting for Boga. And when people turned out, they really voted for Faisal. So there are those surprises. That's what I'm saying. We do predict, and by the law says that the last poll we publish cannot be, has to be at least on the 6th day, because we need to leave 5 days before the election. So we publish a poll, let's say on the let's say 3rd of
The
August,
3rd of August.
as an example.
It's the final day that you can publish a poll.
Don't forget that you've taken another 2 to 3 or 4 days to collect the data.
Prior
so
to that.
add that. We end up having like over 10 to 11 days.
So next week is when you're doing your next poll.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So anything can happen. Anything can happen.
Between now and then.
Yes.
I've just done the math again. If we were to go with that probable definition, okay, not probable, but those who have said definitely will turn out to vote at 70%. 70% of the 22 million voters would be about 15.5 million. If we then look at Wajackoyah as 4%, it's about 618,000 voters.
Yeah.
That's more than Musalia Mudavadi got at number 3 in 2013.
Exactly. And Salia is a very seasoned politician.
It's interesting, but you know,
Bad probability.
even as we head towards the end of this, there's something I'd like to throw at you, just for consideration. You know, science tells us one thing, that the decisions that human beings make through logic represents 20% of the decisions they make, and emotions 80. So,
I agree with you 300%.
yes,
Emotionally.
emotionally, yes. So the likelihood of there being a change, well, it's still out there. Because depending, as you say correctly, someone coins something emotional that appeals to people, you can see a shift like you've never seen. Either way.
And these things turn in a weekend, and
It's turned.
like you're
Just
saying
wa-
in Msambweni, it affected turnout, it affected the choice.
Yes, it did.
Yeah. Any rumors, insinuations, things that will make people panic.
Kiambu will talk about that.
Yes.
Yes.
In 2017.
Kabogo's candidate just went down the drain because of a rumor.
Yes.
Over one weekend, and that
One.
was it.
And
It
you're
just
done.
catches fire and you're done. And the candidates, of course, they're politicians, they know this.
Yes.
Yeah.
They know how to time so that you have the maximum impact. It's like the kick by Gabriel Selassie. You know this is it. Am I going to kick at 100 or at 80 or at 150? Depending on who your opponent is. It's a good one. Maggie, thank you very much for joining us today. So the next one, are you doing a final poll before the election?
Would like to do 2.
2 before the...
Yeah, so
August
one will
9.
be definitely face-to-face, because you remember I told you that we want to see whether the undecided can go down. And then one last one just before the election.
Who finances these polls?
We have what you call an omnibus approach. So you have one questionnaire, and then TIFA has like 10 questions on the poll, and then we get people who would like to survey to load questions. I must say that in the last survey, the Standard Media Group did load 10 questions and pay for them. So we then gave Standard Group those questions and separate from others and other clients. So most of the people who end up loading questions on our surveys are mainly academicians, media houses, and so on.
Okay.
Yes.
Not political parties, not the campaigns.
Rarely. And what happens is that even if a campaign asks us to load questions, they would only load questions separate and not connected to the presidential ones, because the presidential ones are ours.
Okay.
We want to avail that to the general public.
Okay. Maggie Ireri is the founder and CEO of Trends and Insights for Africa. That's TIFA Research. We've been talking about this latest poll that they released yesterday and what it means and the implications of it in the remaining days to the general election. Thank you for joining us, Maggie.
Thank you for having me.